Great. Well, let's kick off. Welcome to the LawFi DAO community call for the 18th of November. Geez, we're racing through the year. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands from which we all meet today and extend our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I'd also like to just restate the values and beliefs of LawFi DAO, being respect, reciprocity, integrity, and kindness, while doing things differently and appreciating that time is our most precious resource. Now, we've had a shocker of the last few weeks in Web3, and I don't know, I expect all of you have seen the announcement from the ASIC yesterday that they're now abandoning their chest replacement project, which was going to use distributed ledger technology, which is now being talked about as, you know, not just hits against crypto, but also the underlying technology. And I just wanted to spend some time talking about this morning before we get into our agenda, because as far as I can see from what the third party Accenture report has shown as in reviewing the project, is a lot of it comes down to scoping and project management. I don't know that the technology has actually been criticized for not working. We can see that Uniswap is very effectively working as an exchange using the technology, but in the institutional context, it just wasn't scoped properly. At least that looks to be what my initial impressions are from the reports coming out, but I'm sure that we'll receive more information as we go. So it's another hard blow, though, and another thing to defend against, to just talk about the features and benefits of the technology. And I do feel that we've had to defend the technology a lot earlier, because the internet had 20 years to mature before it started getting mainstream adoption, and it didn't have the same sort of tokenized or financial aspects to it. Whereas because tokens do allow for the transfer of value, maybe that's at fault for, bringing it into mainstream, making it, financial in nature earlier than it should have been, and hasn't allowed the true qualities to show through as we get good innovation coming from this technology. So I am sad and I'm upset coming to you all today. It's a hard couple of blows, especially over the last few weeks. All right, so we can, any comments, any reflections from the group?
I think it's just dive back into the innovation space, and there's so much going on today. I was just listening to the guys from Helium that are talking about the importance of decentralized connectivity. So just away from payments, it's about, are we going to be able to connect to make payments? And so there's so much going on. What's the real story behind it? Is it due to the centralized nature of the system now not wanting to let go and that power and influence? And I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah, we may never know.
So let's keep building.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, my view is that I think you're spot on, Joni, in terms of looking at this scoping and project management piece that comes to the heart of proper planning in the first place. And if you don't plan properly, you set yourself up for failure. And in the scientific community, when you sit down and you work through a body of work that you're going to effectively do an experiment in, it's set up at the beginning with what the scope and what the framework is to how it is and how you can measure against that. And it certainly plays to one of the things we're going to be talking about today in terms of proper planning in this space. But it's disappointing that yet again, Australia's sort of seen a little bit of headwind and run for cover straight up. It just is not, there is a reason why we are number 93 the last time I looked in the world in terms of commercialising innovation. And that's what we're living through again. So the ideas might be here, but we have to look elsewhere for people that take a slightly more mature view and a broader view on how to do it. But it all starts with planning.
Exactly.
I don't know. I think that the ASX move, it should have they should have failed quicker. I think that it was actually quite interesting that they jumped into it in the very beginning, and surely it was just a headline move that just cost $250 million after a while. But I'm not against, to be honest, for companies to jump in and try things. And with regards to your comment about having to defend the technology, I don't find that very often, to be honest. I think that what I end up doing in many conversations is using the defensibility of the technology as a way to counter many of the views that people have when they're mixing and matching many of the concepts that are part of Web3. I don't think that people necessarily attack the tech itself. What they attack is it's the shitcoin, or it's the idea that Web3 has outside of the tech, because people many times don't really understand it. So I think that it's really important for us at this stage to really understand what it is that people see Web3 as. And even within our own community, I don't think that we have a clear definition of what it is. And therefore we end up having conversations that touch upon many different topics, and nobody's really talking about the same thing, and therefore it's really hard to have an adult conversation. But again, the blockchain itself as a tech, I don't think has been questioned particularly much in the areas that I've been in. But different people have different opinions.
It's more so what I'm seeing in being reported in the mainstream media, that the tech, like the headlines are, the tech hasn't proven itself. It's too complex. There's too many, like exactly what you've just said. There's too many ways of describing the different tokens, what they do, and it's just all too complex and hard, and therefore it will stay that way, because it won't just reach that easily accessible foothold. So yeah.
And I think that a final thought there, we had an event a few days ago, and I think that across the panel there was a view that none of this would have happened if we had clear views in terms of regulation. And again, I think that one of the most important things that we need to do as a community is to stop victimizing and start kind of understanding why things actually happen, and not jump onto the headline bandwagon and pointing fingers, because at the end of the day, regulation doesn't solve this, right? We've had Kerviel, Queco, Bernie. We've had billion-dollar frauds within highly regulated, highly compliant environments. And obviously those processes don't stop what will always happen, which is fraud. Maybe not on chain, right? But
that's the point. Like, this is why, as messy as DAOs are, and we have a lot of work to figure DAOs out, I still value the transparency of the strategic direction, the members having input, the broader ecosystem having input in a very transparent environment, because a lot of the reports are saying that there are a number of employees that left on the basis, or the alleged basis, that they ethically weren't comfortable with what they saw going on, or where questions were going unanswered, or not answered satisfactorily. And all of those reasons didn't make their way in, or a transparent way, to the public for us to be able to scrutinize the operations earlier. And I'm not saying all exchanges should be run as DAOs, but the DAO experiment is an experiment in more transparent corporate governance.
I agree with you.
There's a really awesome Bankless DAO podcast, and it's the open subscription. It's not the paid subscription, and it goes into, it doesn't touch on FTX as a topic, because I think it's getting a lot of airtime, but it goes into what does it mean in terms of actual economic cost to decide to use a DEX over a centralized exchange. And there was modeling that was discussed in that episode, and I can share it with anyone that wants it. They were looking at around about 65, 66 basis points for trading on a DEX, bless you, Joni. And it was like 10 to 30 on a centralized exchange. So we're looking at something that is not entirely unfamiliar within the realms of, there's an argument for decentralization and there's a premium on it. Look at organic, look at green. These are things that where the decision to make something in a particular way that doesn't only focus on shareholder return equals an uplift in costs or friction or regulatory uncertainty or, add ... It is meant to be tricky because we're trying to solve something. And I'm going to agree with you, Arturo. I don't think that this is an opportunity to victimization and to play into that. The PR narrative on blockchain is just terrible. We need to hire a PR person because we've just gotten slammed this past few weeks. But I mean, how many people can actually cogently speak to the payment rails that they, do international transactions on? How many one of your friends can get together and, discuss articulately Swift and how that works and how that came about? Answer is few, unless you hang out with payment nerds, in which case you need to get out more. Actually, no, they're really cool. But I mean, we're getting a lot of flack. We're copping the flack from the media. We're copping the flack for having complex technology. We're copping the flack because, we've had just the biggest, train crash for something that's regulated, like a toy train, but is actually a locomotive. All of these things are happening, but we're still here. We're still going to build, and let's get on with it. Let's have a good time. This industry is a great industry. The people in it are enthusiastic and passionate, and I'm so happy to be part of it. So, shitty narrative, so what? I'm sticking around.
Yeah, well said. Oh, I love it. Well, yeah, there's lots to unpack, and I think with what we can do in the LawFi DAO community, we just build in our own way, experiment in our own way, and try to have a positive impact over the next little while and maybe in the long term, who knows. So just to get onto the agenda now, and then once we get through that, we can open up for general community discussion again. A few quick updates, all in the establishment work stream. I heard back from, well, first of all, we had the presentation to ASIC last week, the educational presentation, which thank you to Leah, Andrew, and Steve Vallis and Greg for looking at those slides and giving feedback and participating where you could. It was an educational session. There's been a summary posted in Discord, so check that out for more details. But some of the questions were really challenging. Why can't you use existing legal structures? Why can't you just stretch them or modify them to allow yourself to be as digitally native as possible, or to have a global membership? And Gordon, the links that you actually shared to the Marshall Islands MyDAO service offering to help you establish a DAO with the Marshall Islands regime, that was a really good 15-minute explainer that the fact that these DAOs are digitally native puts them in direct hardship to have written documents to go through exactly how members should vote, and the written documents have to be enforced post hoc or after the fact, whereas when we're in digitally native environment, you have the mechanism of governance, you have the vote, it's implemented automatically, and so I think we'll have to spend the next little while comparing a constitution, the rules, how that would be written versus what can be achieved when it's coded and just explained in documentation such as a white paper, or like you would see in the Git books as more of the manual to describe how to interact with the technology, but the technology are the rules. So we've got a lot of work to explain that, you know, why digitally native organizational structures just don't quite fit with the existing rules and ways of enforcing things based on a written document after the fact. And the Board of Tax, the Australian Board of Tax, who are doing the review into the taxation of various digital asset transactions, we had made the same offer to give them an educational presentation and to get their thoughts on an observer type of membership. They just came back this morning actually to say that it's, and I'm paraphrasing, it's not within their scope or their mandate to be part of a DAO. What their role is to consult with industry, write their reports, and report to government in accordance with their mandate. And because they're not in the external consultation phase with industry anymore, they weren't welcoming of an educational presentation. But we had provided the draft, the version 0.1 of the white paper to them. So they have had the benefit of that during the consultation. And they're now reaching out to tax authorities around the world to compare how they're treating these things for tax purposes. So, and no traction with the other policy-making bodies in Australia yet to have that sort of educational presentation, but we'll keep going. The membership token is the next thing that we're going to try and do as an experiment. And there's an email sent out Friday last week encouraging people to join the Discord server, as well as comment about whether, you know, how they're feeling, what's holding them back, you know, what would be more welcoming of a way to more actively contribute, and do they want to actively contribute, or do they just want to be a member by way of show of support and to observe what's going on? So the couple of members that have responded, the majority are flowing towards wanting to be that like observer, supporter. But thank you to those that are, you know, regularly turning up to the community call and that have responded, including Andrew, to say, you know, we're happy to be more actively involved. On the active involvement, I'm going to throw to Andrew shortly to talk through the offer that Multilateral Group have made to take Lawfy DAO through a bit of a process of planning based on cooperative principles, just to set up what our program of work and effort might look like in the next year, so that we can start to get at least 5 members actively involved in that process, and set budgets, set, you know, timelines, and just work towards achieving our goals, or just completion and observations from our experiments. And I forgot to mention in the community call last week, but those of you that have read the email, we were kindly offered a free ticket to NFT Fest that's happening in Melbourne next year. The first to respond to that email got the free ticket. That was Jules, one of our members. So congratulations, Jules, and he'll be happily at NFT Fest. So anybody else is there, make sure you congratulate him on getting the fastest reply. It was literally a minute after I sent the email. So good to see. I also spoke to my contact in the UK about that CIC structure that Miles was telling us about. It's one of the only structures in the world that allows a hybrid for-profit and not-for-profit purpose. Similar to that, to our distributing co-op, but it's within a corporate structure at that federal level. My contact couldn't really understand why a number of DAOs don't use that structure, but was thinking that it may have related to one of the announcements by the UK FCA, their financial conduct regulator, something that they wouldn't regulate or wouldn't seek to regulate tokens that had come out of that structure. Now, I may have been parroting that in a completely wrong way. I'm still understanding the reasons why, and the UK contact is looking into it. So once I hear back, I'll report here, because it is very strange. But the contrary to that was that a lot of the DAOs from entrepreneurial and founders based in the UK, they're opting for the Sandy Islands structure, where for regulatory purposes, there's the foundation set up, you know, somewhere in the Caribbean. But they are aware that because there's still centralization and control by people based in the UK, for tax purposes, they are treating those foundations as UK tax residents, and they're bringing them the ICO or the token generation event proceeds back to the UK and reporting them. And so that's a not often reported fact. And a lot of people around the world say, we'll do what everyone else has done and do Panama, BVI, Caymans, foundations as our structures, you know, to launch our DAO and to do our token generation events. But often it doesn't trickle down to say, well, you do have to bring the tax back to your jurisdiction of tax residence if you still are effectively controlling that entity from, you know, wherever you're based, and if they have those same sort of controlled foreign company or controlled foreign entity rules. So because of the advent of that structure, the deduction was a CIC, being a company incorporated in the UK, wouldn't necessarily shield you from a regulatory perspective in the same way that those Sandy Island funds have been serving the benefit. I mean, still question whether it's effective, but it more makes it litigation remote, being more difficult to enforce for being an entity incorporated in another offshore jurisdiction or with multiple offshore jurisdictions, which is what we're seeing play out with FTX. If anybody's seen that behemoth of a corporate structure across many jurisdictions. And then I'm just going through my list to make sure. Oh, I wanted to say a call out to Electra, who has put her hand up to work on a list of things that would be useful for tax agents to sort of search through a LawFi DAO interface if we go this way, and pay a fixed price to pay to rely. So we've previously talked a lot about legal advices that could be done through the pay to rely model, but Electra is thinking on how pay to rely products could be useful for tax agents, so that we can start putting our minds to things that would be helpful, at least on an experimental basis, to test the utility of a pay to rely model. I think that'll probably flow into early next year in the January, February mark. So on just logistics, I'm away for a family reunion next week. So just wanted to test with the group if we're happy to skip next week and reconvene the week after, or if I had any volunteers to do a community call on Friday. What do you think? Any objections to holding over for 2 weeks and reconvening in 2 weeks?
I'm happy to do that because
No.
NFT Fest is next week. So a lot of people, well, I'm definitely going to be there, so I won't be able to attend.
Yeah, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm so sorry to miss it. All right, and so that's it for the official agenda, and I will hand over to Andrew to just talk through this workshop or process offering. And then Miles, if you're in a position to talk about your chat with the Marshall Islands representatives, would love to hear how that went too, only if you feel comfortable to do so in this forum. So, Andrew.
Thanks, Joni. Well, I think for everybody that's on this call who are pretty well regular attendees of the community call, you'd know by now that we bang on a lot about planning and organising and structure. And we take and I'm talking about Multilateral Group as the entity of which I'm a founding member and representing them on in LawFi DAO. But one of the things we've been working on is really looking at the planning organisation and design of a digital organisation. What does a digital organisation, a next generation corporate or a DAO or a metaverse or any other plethora of native entities that come through over the next number of years. How are they actually structured, and how can that be done in a coordinated planning way up front that addresses key issues when it comes through to operations? And we've talked many weeks ago about how there doesn't appear to be, from research so far, what an operation environment actually looks like for a strategic execution of a DAO. Now, we have been working for many, many months on doing just that. So we have established a program that we're out talking to early stage people with at the present time about how one goes through a series of active participation sessions to co-design using an established process and workflow that we've developed to build up the content that meets a couple of key questions for the organisation. And in this particular case, it's really about it's as simple as, what does your DAO, what do you want your DAO to do, and how do you want to do it? Now, that sounds simple, but when you break that down and you look at something like Glorify DAO, for example, what do we have to take into account? We have to take into account that there are all sorts of different members and interests that will be represented here, and a number of them fall very much into professional services classifications that have their own obligations and codes of conduct that they have to work to. So as our name suggests, we take a multilateral view to how things are, and we very much look at the broader picture rather than just get focused and fixated on what is right for one particular group within the mechanism. And our research over the last year and a half has very much established that to do things properly, you really need to set up this functional and regulatory equivalence mantra and work that through. So we've been working through how to do that, and we've put that into a workshop series. And what we'd like to do with Glorify DAO is take Glorify DAO through as an experiment through all the work we've done, which we've all built out into Notion boards and Airtables and things like that. So we've got a very structured facilitation framework, if you like, to work through. And what we're going to invite is put together a program for early next year, and we'll put the framework around over the next couple of weeks. And in fact, with Joni being away next week, I think the week after is probably the perfect time to do the education piece to our internal group about this, and work through and give some information as to what the program involves, how people can participate, and how they can be recognised for their participation. So that's what we'll put together over the next couple of weeks. As Joni said, we need really a minimum of 5 committed people or entities to get involved, and that again follows cooperative principles, which work on the concept of 5 different forms of perspective coming into a group. So what we are giving, the program we're building is very much based on cooperative principles, but it's really about taking forward some of the key components that we shared with ASIC last week in terms of what sort of operational needs to work, and things like how do you process transactions using a protocol, and when you're looking at that from both a generating and a receiving party. And what is a transaction? It can be financial, it can be non-financial. It can be a reporting piece around your net zero obligations, for example. It can be anything you want it to be, but it needs to be built into the framework. Looking at financial and non-financial disclosures and how that's reported. Consumer protection, which is shouldn't be forgotten, but is very easily forgotten, as we've seen with the FTX schmozzle. But it is clearly something that regulators, whether there's regulation or not in place, are always going to default to looking after, because they do in every other area of endeavour. Why would they not look at consumer protection, both in terms of investors and wholesale and retail investors? And then the acceptance of risk and liability and how that works out into the associated insurance piece. So there's a whole series of things there that are all part of the program we're looking at, that are all there to unpack. So in the end, what we end up with is something built by the members for the members that we can then build into a framework to have a solid base to go forward. So that's the concept. The idea is to put the recruitment together before Christmas, get everybody on board to all questions and what's involved, et cetera, et cetera. It's purely a time issue. So there's a commitment of time required over probably 5 workshops or 5 facilitated sessions of an hour and a half-ish. Don't hold me to that. We might be able to compress that. That's the general concept. Some homework away for people to think around through this, and stuff that effectively happens over a direct week-by-week program. So it's not a long process, but it's quite a detailed process and very much a piece of knowledge bank. And the intent is to be able to record and allocate the levels of endeavour that people are putting in, not only from time, but the quality of the information that goes into it, and to be able to recognise that for everybody in the process. So that's an overall summary.
Thank you, Andrew. And I know you and I have had a lot of discussions on it, but welcome any initial reactions or feedback from anyone else on the call, either by putting your hand up, comments, or the chat, or reaching out to Andrew or myself afterwards, as well as to express interest in being one of the more active people involved in those workshops or preparation. Okay, well, Miles, did you feel comfortable to sharing insights from your conversation or reflections on the week that's been?
Yeah, yes. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. The internet's down, so I'm using my phone, which I don't usually use. Yeah, so I note that the Law Reform Commission report makes a brief reference to the Marshall Islands. The Marshall Islands has passed some legislation with respect to the creation of DAOs. It attaches to their non-profit associations. I managed to find on the internet a copy of the legislation and a copy of the amendments to the legislation. I haven't been able to get a copy of the regulations and forms, nor a government contact. The material on the internet points you to an organisation which is touted as having the exclusive rights to forming DAOs in the Marshall Islands. They appear to be, the staff appear to be based in California. And so after trying the Australian Embassy to get the regulations, no reply. After trying a number of law librarians who know what they're doing in the South Pacific to get the regulations, they all came up to a brick wall. So I contacted this organisation and they gave me half an hour to talk to one of the people. I still don't have the regulations or the forms, but it was a nice, nice chat. And they've put me down for their DAO day I think, which they run a seminar with multiple people on their DAO formation. They said that they had, and I said, can I invite others? And they said, yeah, sure. So I'll let you know when that invitation arrives if you want to come along to it. I asked them how many they had incorporated. They had formed. They said they had 15 on the books and 30 altogether. This model of outsourcing is not new to the Marshall Islands because they're, after Panama, they're the second biggest ship registers in the world, and they outsourced that ship registration to a body which provides a small fee for every ship that they register. They tried to do it with legislation for a stable coin or some sort of digital coin, I'm not sure whether it's stable, called the SOV, and they had legislation and they outsourced it allegedly to a Israeli-based firm, and were well down the track for issuing establishing the SOV. But the World Bank and the IMF both said, we don't want you to do this, and must have brought some pressure because they stopped the project in its tracks. So he was a nice guy, but he didn't let on too much information other than to say that he thought the prospects for DAOs was very rosy, and the technological advances in programming that he'd been seeing, he thought that setting up a DAO would be relatively easy in the 2023 with all the bells and whistles made sort of user-friendly, do-it-yourself, what you see is what you get, and all that other sort of stuff. And he thought it had, thought that they had great prospects. So I didn't get what I was after. And if anybody has the regulations to the Marshall Island DAO legislation, I'm happy to speak to them. But I'm at the end of
end of your tether.
Yeah, well, I can't think of any other way to try and get it without expending lots of energy. But
let me ask a few of my Web3 legal contacts to see if they can get a copy. I'll send a few messages today.
Thank you very much.
Is that the Not-for-Profit Entities Act?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
There is something on the internet. I'm not sure what the source is. There is a document here that I could drop over to you.
Yeah, I've got the act. I've got the Constitutional Act, and then the Corporations Act, and then the amendments which do it, but not the forms and the regulations which the Amendment Act mentions. So,
okay.
Yeah, I'd be happy.
But that My DAO, which is the one with the exclusive sort of authority, that video that Gordon shared, they charge something like US $7,000 for a DAO to use them to get their Marshall Islands registration. There are other costs that the Marshall Islands charge, but basically that's their $7,000 fee per DAO. So
yeah, and some of that goes to the Marshall Islands, and they're using it for health, hypothecating it for health, expenditure. So interesting model, but it's worked for them for ship registration, but anyway.
Well, but the other feedback I am hearing is that some some policymakers are trying to work on their DAO frameworks, whether they're going to add a DAO as a new legal structure or adopt that legal recognition approach by adopting something that looks like the Koala DAO model law. now most of the policymakers are looking to Wyoming, and the DAO LLC legislation that had been put out, gosh, was it 1.5 years, 2 years ago now? And that's already been amended too. But because it's the thing that's most talked about, it's from a US state, most of them seem to want to use that to sort of form the foundations of how they're going to recognize a new entity and regulate them, which I was never really happy with the Wyoming approach. There's good parts about it, but I much prefer the legal recognition under the Koala DAO model law, even though there's still some tinkering I would make with that DAO model law. So
why is it that you didn't like the main point of not liking the Wyoming ones? Is that because it really just comes back to this, a group of people behind it?
The Wyoming approach, the thing that rubs me the wrong way is it's still effectively a written document. Like and Vermont BBLC took that same approach too, and they really just want you to write the plain text and put it in the source code that mints the tokens, very, very bluntly, and it doesn't pay enough reflection to the digital native nature of both having an autonomous operational protocol and a distributed governance structure where the voting is on chain. And I realize that the way I've spoken about that's more protocol DAOs, like the true DAOs, where you're trying to make the operations autonomous and the governance as transparent and autonomous as it can be. And we've got social club DAOs, we've got investment club DAOs, and so forth. What the Wyoming law really does is support investment club DAOs with less than 99 members, not the big global community DAOs, which is sort of where my passions lie and sort of where it all started, because Bitcoin obviously wanted to be having nodes all around the world. You get the same with Ethereum. There's those basic concepts of why you want to globally decentralize and have trust in real-time compliance of the autonomous protocol and less human input in making those decisions that are not transparent. So I just sort of, maybe it's a halfway house to get us to the utopia of on-chain and autonomy, but it just didn't hit the mark for me.
Joni, talking about halfway houses, it occurred to me during the week that with establishment of DAOs, it seems to be a two-stage process. There's the initial startup, and then when you get to automate things in blockchain and code. I wondered if the concept of corporate law here and in England of having there are rules with respect to promoters of companies, and it's basically about when promoters can be liable for offers and whatever before a company is incorporated. But I wonder if the regulation and facilitation of DAOs doesn't need a two-step legislative division. The first one would be modelled on a promoter. So you're a DAO promoter, and it allows you to, there are certain rules about creating a community and getting things going. And then you make the step to becoming a functioning DAO. And that may ease the complexity of trying to do it all in one step and one statute. I just wondered how you reacted to that idea.
Well, I think Gordon would have some fantastic insights on this, because he's much more experienced than me in building communities, and it's very hard work. But from the legal side, what I've seen more is the DevCo approach where just a small team of maybe 2 or 3 people build the protocol. So whether it's the Uniswap exchange or the Maker lending protocol, they build that, raise funds in a corporate structure to build and pay the people to do it. But then it gets launched in open source autonomous fashion, and the decentralized governance is permitted through the governance token. So that's the 2-stage process more often that happens with protocol DAOs. But it would be different for protocol, social club, investment, like the proliferation of different types of DAOs, depending on whether it's a 2-stage process or something else that would be more easy. But Gordon, do you're building communities? What do they pay attention to the legal structure?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of transitioning to a DAO, I guess that's why I'm here, and why I haven't just spun up a DAO is learning about what it means building a community first and then transitioning to a DAO. But I think maybe I'm definitely not qualified for that. The DAO builders are the people that are doing that. Like maybe Arturo would know a lot more about that side of things.
Arturo, are you in a position to speak? Would love to hear your thoughts, if you can. I know people are traveling usually in the morning, so we'll come back.
There is questions. Say there's a project in Brisbane, and they've say for example the library. I mean, it's not DAO related, but it's where to launch, when to launch. Due to the library case, they've not launched their blockchain project in Australia because they're just not sure. We've not launched a DAO because we're not sure. That's why we looked into, say, the Marshall Islands, and then what would that mean if we were based here in Australia, but we did launch the DAO in the Marshall Islands? And so those questions about, you're talking about the UK people being taxed in the UK, but they've got their legal entity down there. So I haven't sorted out those answers yet. So to learn.
It is, because just having a foreign incorporated entity, such as in the Marshall Islands, it does give you a legal entity. So perhaps that has limited liability. Perhaps it's got proper recognition that it has capacity to enter into like contracts legally with other counterparties. So that gives you a couple of features. But the regulatory, are you offering a financial service or a financial product with any of your tokens? Are you earning income for which tax is payable? All of that is based on behavior and economic substance. So if all your people, if you're effectively still centralized in Australia, then you probably need to be getting advice from your Australian financial services lawyer and your Australian tax lawyer, in addition to paying that $7,000 to get your Marshall Islands entity set up. But at least you are set up as a DAO structure, and then you're sort of in a halfway house with the deeming provisions in the tax law, and then from the financial services perspective, it's that nexus is a financial services business, being provided from Australia or has a geographic link to Australia. So you're in that invisible kind of doesn't really make sense deeming provisions where you probably need to be speaking to a lawyer, getting the advice, and also having a practical component to that advice about the practical parameters. So don't talk about the price of your governance token on social media. Talk about the functional utility of it being an interest in your DAO. So you probably could do it, but given the negative sentiment, the aggressive enforcement actions going on around the world, you probably want to be very careful at the moment and exercising a lot of caution. That's not legal advice, that's just general comments. Leah, did you, Miles, I think you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Hello. Yeah, can you hear me now?
Got you back.
Joni, I wonder if there are any DAOs that you know of that don't seek to raise money from the public, that just have a membership fee.
Yes.
Because it seems this whole thing is driven by the allure of making huge profits on, or making huge gains on governance tokens or whatever. And when people join a non-profit association, it's usually the furthest thing from their mind that they'll be able to sell their membership but for a profit. So, I mean, is there any group who are joined together because of a common interest, rather than profiting, because that's what makes non-profits, and that's what makes communities other than investment communities and the incentivization of making wealth. But it's the glue that binds them together. There are other things, but are there any that don't have that are bound together? Because I suspect you may find a lot of interesting attributes of those organisations which have managed to survive and thrive without the incentivization of financial gain.
Well, one of the first to do it was LexDAO, and that is they call themselves legal engineers. But
I'm a member of that. Yep.
Yeah, but you would notice that the LexDAO membership token is a non-transferable NFT. It is not a fungible governance token. And one of the things that their, core strategic members have continued to say is they feel they could have more engagement with LexDAO if they were able to put the token incentives around it that you get with a fungible governance token. So by a person being more actively involved in LexDAO, maybe they get some POAPs, maybe they get some milestones, that sort of resume building thing that we're trying to do in LawFi DAO too. But that the combination of the financial gain of getting more governance tokens that can be sold on market for people that really want to get in and contribute to that club, that mixing of the for-profit they haven't ventured into, but they feel that is what's holding them back from being one of these digitally native DAOs with the inbuilt incentive mechanism.
Interesting. It's the difference between altruistic incentives and financial incentives. And it's a bit of the difference between employees who are driven by intrinsic or extrinsic rewards. I find it a fascinating topic. And until somebody cracks the intrinsic, non-profit DAOs won't work as well as they should.
Yeah, and I mean, you're seeing it with LawFi DAO. We've got no token incentives at the moment, and everybody is contributing for purely altruistic purposes. And of a 34 size membership base, we have a consistent sort of 5, 6, 7 contributing in the Discord and turning up to the community call, which actually, if you call that maybe 2 to 5% of active engagement of the membership, that is quite a common statistic across DAO when you look at the governance statistics. That there's June Analytics and there's a couple of bodies that have said it's really hard, that there's voter apathy out there because a lot of them do want to be involved in the project and they want to observe, they want to use the utility and sort of hold the governance token and stake it as a measure of confidence and support of the utility of the protocol or the social club. But they don't want to be actively involved. So that's what the statistics are showing, and even more so as the legal uncertainties and the judgments are coming down, making it a very scary time. I just want to pause. Leah, I know you had your hand up. I don't know if we've answered the question or comment since.
No, my comment was more around the discussion around Marshall Islands and the DAO structures there. It was more, I know it's a completely different topic, but with FTX sort of blowing up and them being offshore, I just wonder how much scrutiny there will be from the government going forward on that, because regulation is surely coming coming through in the next couple of years. Don't know whether it will be on centralized exchanges or DAOs or what structures it will be on, but yeah, just sort of broad comment. I don't know if that will be the case, but kind of, yeah, alarm bells for me.
Yeah, so in other words, if somebody or if a DAO did have their registration in Marshall Islands, you know, it sort of triggers the FTX being registered in Bahamas and not having, you know, a more robust framework in which to run their protocol or their governance of their community. Is that what gives you sort of shivers?
Yeah, along those lines.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. Me too. But that might
because
be
it
the
sort of
halfway
comes
house.
down to perception. It comes down to perception and you know, doing the work with ASIC and all the educational pieces that we are kind of doing now as a DAO. Yeah, I wonder what the narrative around that will be like and what the perception will be longer term.
Yeah, I agree with you. Completely agree. Arturo, I know you were trying to maybe comment on the community building side too. Not sure if you're in a position to speak.
Yeah, sorry, just running around.
It's okay.
Sorry, can you remind me in terms of what was
in
it,
building
you think?
in building a community around a DAO that is digitally native. It doesn't have any legal structure yet. Maybe it's talking about legal structure, but how do you find, based in your experience with Oz DeFi Association and with the other DAOs you work with, how easy or hard is it to community build in a DAO native structure?
It's an interesting one because I'm, apart from, well, not really being part of your DAO as a member, but kind of looking at it.
You're a friend.
Exactly, I'm a friend. I also look at Fundamental, the one by Rob Morris, and then obviously the DeFi community, which is not a DAO at all. But as a community, what I see is that especially the Oz DeFi community, it's very interesting because it doesn't really have a purpose apart from just being there for community members to discuss topics relating to Web3. And I think that the only real kind of constraint that we put into the topics of conversation was not to overly sell their tokens. And there was actually very little of that going on. And the second one is just to be respectful. I think that the statistics that you mentioned I think that they're the same. It's just that we have around 1,200 members in the Discord. And I think that it's maybe around, it's up to 100 people that actually say something, and it's around 20 of those people that actually are very active. And the reason I think that they're active is because of the passion for the topic. And you can equate that to the altruistic side because nobody's making any money off it. I think that the tricky part, if with a scenario like that, is that unless there is an economic incentive, it's hard to scale. On the other hand, I would argue that the DeFi community is kind of scaling, and what people get from being part of the community, or at least monitoring the Discord, is that they get information instead of monetary value. And information
they get learning as well, learning opportunities,
yes.
Right? And educational opportunities through all the events.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, Leah, you can actually please share your view on this too, being a very strong part of it.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you said, and I think it's kind of, at the moment it's forming organically. There is no profit incentive of any sort. It's just people wanting to get together and sort of discuss and learn together and find out who's building what in the community. As the time goes on, I don't know, it would actually be a very interesting experiment to see whether it does make sense to have some form of an NFT or a token for perhaps people who are more involved, who are more active. But again, that would depend on what does that token give you and what you're voting on, right? So what decisions are being made? Because at the moment, there are no decisions that drive any monetary outcomes. Therefore, it's sort of it's a slightly simpler structure, I think.
Yeah, we've actually been I've been very hesitant and scared to push a token of any form and effectively build any form of structure, because it feels like the second that you start building structure, if it's not surgically designed and it really has a very, very clear purpose, then you're just going in opposite, because people start getting expectations.
100%. And until you figure out what the business model is and what you're trying to achieve, I don't think there's a point in launching any tokens, because for now it's literally just community and onboarding.
Yeah, Leah, that's the cracker, and I think Andrew's brought that around to the point that, you know, I'm doing the advanced diploma of applied blockchain. I'm just about finished, and I was sort of coming back to, like, how does that apply to building a project from scratch? And I was sort of doing my project that way, but then I look back and a lot of it seems to be like you go into an organization and apply blockchain to it, but it comes down to, you know, got a white paper, what's the business model, and then putting it into production. And so I think Andrew saying, yep, it's setting up the project, getting the project going. There'll be the active core people that are building, there'll be observers, participants, contributors, they'll come in. But I think, does that sound pretty much, I'm excited that Andrew's got that concept to start building the project.
And I think an interesting example of building that community and then launching a token is Sweatcoin. I know it's completely different sort of community and what they were trying to achieve, etc. But they didn't have a coin for a long, long time before they decided to launch anything, and they just focused on building up a community before anything even came to fruition. So I think that's an interesting kind of back solving into it.
So on that side about building the community, I mean, we can build a community faster and bigger here if you want. I took it that we were sort of like, well, we're navigating through regulatory frameworks and different departments, so we've sort of backed off on the real community building and just letting it organically grow. And that's probably a good idea. I saw there's new people coming in this week that will have an interest. There'll be people that'll come and go. Getting our communications going to those that are observing, wanting to participate, but when that, you know, so I guess getting some blogging of some kind going, or back to we put the community building on pause. Are we ready to start communicating again to everyone?
Gordon, I think that kind of depends for me on sorry, Joni, to interrupt. It depends on, have we made a decision on which path we're going down, right? Are we for profit or not for profit? For me, that kind of, before we start building a community and communicating, I think we kind of need to figure out which path we're going down.
Yeah, I think to your point earlier, Toro, around AusDeFi not having a purpose. Well, LawFi DAO has at least 3 purposes at the moment, and they all require different, and that's not a bad thing. It just is how it's laid up at the present time. But each of them then point to having different regulators that they need to appease. They have therefore different rules that they have to follow, and that is part of the complexity that we need to unpack. And certainly from experience that I've had in establishing cooperatives previously, the defining the purpose is the very basis of where you start, and that is hard. In a cooperative sense, you're looking, and I'm not advocating this for LawFi DAO, but in a cooperative sense, you're looking to distill a broad framework of what your purpose is and will be forever, because under regulation you can't change it. That gives you the breadth to be able to do stuff that you don't know about yet, but also captures the passion about what it is that you're doing in the first place. if that makes sense. And to do that is a lot of work, and it's a lot of discussion, and it's a lot of input from a lot of people to distill it down into essentially 12 to 15 words. That's the exercise we're about to undertake, is really say, well, these are the key areas we want to look at from a broader purpose perspective. How are we going to distill them down so that we address and prioritise what we need to do, and how we engage with the communities to build it up?
Yeah,
it's really sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that I think that in that dimension, OzDeFi and LawFi DAO are polar opposites, because you guys want to follow and are aware of every single possible rule, and we are literally just YOLOing into absolutely everything. And we're hoping that it's okay because nobody's making any money of it. It's just the Discord in reality. But I could be. Don't correct me. Don't tell me what I'm doing wrong. Because all of a sudden then we become conscious of it. But yeah, I think that it's a very, very different target, right? You guys really want to follow every single rule and kind of test the rule in so doing.
Yeah, and yeah. I was going to exactly tell you what might be doing wrong, but maybe I won't. Given that but in a more general context, I just go back to the discussion with Gordon and the Marshall Islands. You know, even though maybe you have a registration in the Marshall Islands or maybe you don't, there's deeming provisions come in. And, you know, in absence of a legal, registered, recognised body, if something goes wrong, people look to the figureheads to sue. So
yeah, in that respect, all we've done is registered a non-for-profit entity here in Australia.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah. Oh, well, it's been fantastic discussion. Vic, I know we haven't heard from you, but you might be driving. I don't know if you want to offer any last thoughts.
I am driving. I'm on the road. I'm in Melbourne, or I'm in Australia at the moment. So it's like every single administrative task needs to be done all at once. But it's been an awesome discussion. I'm really going to deep dive into the Marshall Islands example. The only other very side issue or side topic was I had the privilege to attend a keynote by Dr. Catherine Bell earlier in the week in Sydney. She's just got this new book out called Convergence. She's advocating, and I quoted it a little bit from the first chapter, around how we need legal structures that actually support the type of innovation that we need to advocate for our fourth and now fifth and sixth industrial revolutions. Definitely an awesome book. Love to chat about it. If anyone wants to pick up a copy and do book club with me, I am around.
Maybe that's how we kick off our community building again, with a book club.
Cool.
Yeah. All right. Well,
can I, Arturo, it was good to hear a lot of us out there building communities and not having any sort of legal structure. It starts out, you start doing something, you spin up Discord. So it's good to hear that people are making sure that their core people are protected. So that was really good to hear. There's a lot of startups and a lot of people out there that are doing things at the moment and they don't really understand the implications. And thanks to Joni, she pointed that out to us when we started the School of Bitcoin. We quickly moved it into a legal structure to make sure that we our core people were protected because we were sharing things and doing things. So it was really good to hear that. Thanks, Arturo.
I appreciate the comments. Funnily enough, we within, let's call it not centralized, which is kind of our work, we try to advocate as much as we can for people to actually follow the rules and be aware of those rules. And most of the time, it's because these entities deal with profits, as opposed to our kind of exact opposite view here in the DeFi community. Because honestly, we don't even. It's not that we don't see ourselves as owners. We are not owners. It is a truly decentralized community in a sense that if we were not there, I think that the topics of conversation would still flourish within the Discord. And that's the major measure that we use in terms of seeing how vibrant the community actually is.
Well said. All right. Well, on that note, thank you all for taking the time today. Have loved the discussion, and when there's no establishment committee after today, and then we'll hold over and we'll reconvene on it'll be the 2nd of December. So see you in the Discord between now and then, and catch you in 2 weeks. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Cheers.